On this episode, we're joined by Maria Harris, who is the founder of Digital Cat Consultancy. Maria has over a decade of experience leading digital change in the mortgage sector, including being part of the team which set up Atom Bank. So today we're going to get her views on what's next for the sector from a digital innovation perspective as we look ahead to 2023. So Maria, firstly, thank you for joining us today.
Hi.
I think it's fair to say you're well known within the mortgage sector, particularly in the technology space, but for those that don't know you, can you give us a bit of background into yourself?
So Maria Harris. Most people probably know me from Atom Bank, where I got to set up the UK's first digital mortgage. Before that, I worked in mortgages. I was head of distribution for Bank of Scotland, Intelligent Finance, back in the days before the global financial crash. I was there when we were rescued by Lloyds, so I was head of distribution for Lloyds for a while. And then I went to do a startup that didn't get started, and then spent some time in building society sector. So I think I've been in financial services about 16, 17 years now. And before that, my background was contact centres. So I've worked for npower, British Airways, some kind of nice, big, well-known brands. Yeah, so background in ops and customer experience and sales and service and all that good stuff.
Cool. And in terms of your business now, you run a consultancy, right?
Yes, I've got, I guess, what they call a portfolio career these days, which, partly by design, partly some, a bit of luck along the way. So I'm a non-exec director at United Trust Bank, who are a specialist bank in London, which is amazing. So that's my first kind of formal NED role. I'd done some voluntary ones before that, but that's my first proper NED role. So those guys are amazing to work with. I do board advisory work for a number of people. Coracle, who I think you guys know quite well. Cojute, who are a distributed ledger technology company, which I'm sure we'll get to talk about today. Plotify, who are a prop tech startup in New York, which is also pretty cool. And Fintech North, which is lovely. So I get to keep some stuff on in the Northeast. So there was kind of board advisory roles, and then I run my consultancy business, which is called Digital Cat. And mainly work with mortgage broker firms, mortgage lenders, mortgage technology firms, and help them digitise their process and rewrite their customer experience and do all the good stuff that I got to do at Atom Bank.
Sounds good. And I think because you came on one of our early episodes of this podcast over Zoom back in the spring of 2020, and I think
a lifetime ago.
And I think at the time it was your consultancy business was fairly new. I'd love to just quickly sort of hear about what that's been like over the last sort of 2 years or so. It's been a fairly interesting period, sort of to put the least on it. So what's that been like?
I'm not going to lie. I've had a few oh shit moments along the way. As in, what did I do? I went from having this amazing exec job where, exec salary and everything, to going self-employed right at the middle of a pandemic. Why did you do that? Amazing being able to look in the rearview mirror. So I think when we spoke, I was doing consultancy work for, I'm probably going to forget a load of people's names here, so apologies. I was working for 27 Tech, who you guys did some work with too, which was fab. Eligible and Coracle and Brightstar. So that was really cool. So my first load of contracts were all kind of broker facing, which was really nice, because even though I'd been lender side doing broker distribution, I'd never actually worked in the broker side of that. So that was really cool to do broker tech and broker firms and a bit of kind of new stuff with Eligible. And then obviously the lockdown came, and first one was fine, that was okay, not too worrying. The second lockdown came, and that was really challenging. And I think mostly because the firms themselves didn't know how things were going to play out. The mortgage market was really shaky. Lenders had, we managed to have the home moving process open, but lenders didn't know what to expect. We were forecasting that house prices were going to drop off a cliff and that lending was going to stop, and it was all just that was really tense. I had a few wobbles, but thankfully, and touch wood, because this is 2 years on since that lockdown, everything's just gone way back the other way, not what I expected at all. So since I last saw you, I've done a lot of work with banks and building societies. There's lots and lots of digital transformation going on, lots of re-platforming, lots of people who've probably had the accelerator or the push they needed on the back of COVID. Staff working from home, customers needing to engage differently, needing different tools that they didn't use before, even just to do things like online calls and verify customers digitally. So there's been a really big push. So yeah, I've done some really lovely banks and building societies, including, let's think, Kensington. I'm doing some work with Scottish Building Society at the moment, with Melton Mowbray, Hinckley and Rugby. Yeah, it's been absolutely lovely. So we've got some really lovely projects on the go. Yeah, it's been really good.
No regrets
fun.
setting up?
None regrets whatsoever. A few more grey hairs than I started with, but yeah, it's been good. Yeah, and I've done some nice tech work as well. So a few startups, CodeJute being one of them. Like I'm sure we'll talk about them a bit more. Done some stuff with Credit Logic in Southern Ireland, which has been lovely, working with somebody who's not in the UK but looking at the UK. I just went with a startup in Glasgow called Black Arrow. That was a lovely blank sheet of paper, whole load of design work, and a bit of work with Mambu, who are a platform as well.
Wow, okay.
So yes, it's been really interesting.
Busy.
Yeah, brokers, lenders, and tech, which is all the things that I love about the industry.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And we've spoken for, I don't think we first met at one of our events, must have been sort of 6-7 years ago, focused on mortgage technology change, and we've spoken a lot about that in recent years, and maybe some of the challenges that the industry has faced. Looking at where we are now, sort of how would you rate the industry of where how far we've come so far?
Yeah, we've had so much change forced upon us, I think, which is, it's challenging at the time when you have to be reactive and you're having to implement things very quickly. But I think that's been a nice proof point in itself, in that we've proven we can react and we can implement a lot quicker than we used to, and we don't have to wait 2 years to go and scope things out and try them and test them and make sure they all work and sign everything off. Like, I think when we first went into the first lockdown, we had Zoom and Teams and digital identity and all this kind of stuff set up within weeks.
Yes.
Staff working from home, remote dialing. Like, it was amazing how quickly that adapted, and amazing how quickly it's become the norm as well. So I think that's probably helped shift a bit on digital mindset. But we've still got a long way to go. Like, we've got more accepting of the tech, but that whole thinking digital first, I think we've still got a really long way to go. And then, the industry's still going to have its challenges. The whole process is still very disparate. We're not amazing at collaboration. We're not great at designing customer journeys end to end. And I think you and I have talked about that 3 years ago when I spoke to you last, and it's still not something we've really got to grips with. I think, but a real change in attitude, I think, towards those things starting to come, and we're definitely seeing more people working together and a bit more thinking about the handoff points between systems and how data flows and how the customer gets passed from one to the other, even if it's not entirely the solution that we'd want.
Yes. So that's interesting. So, that's been a perennial sort of issue for the industry for a decade or more. It's just that sort of electronic passing of data between systems and different parties throughout the kind of the life cycle of a mortgage and the home buying process. With all your work that you're doing in the market and what you're seeing in the market, are you seeing sort of positive change with that?
Well, there's no getting away from the fact that we are still very document driven, and we really need to make a really big step to think data, not documents. Because the default is we think forms. When we think about evidence, we think about pay slips and bank statements and SA302s and valuation forms and stuff, and we think about stuff in the terms of forms, and that's a big habit to break. But also because that's how, you look at all the different parts of our industry, and it's not one bit of it, it's all of the sector, from estate agents right through lenders, brokers, everything. Our target operating models and how our staff are trained and everything, the way that we've set up our customer journeys is designed around what was a paper process. And even where we've made electronic versions of it, the process is still actually the same. And all we've done is said, we used to ask you to fax us those bank statements or snail mail them. Now you can upload them or take a photo of them, but it's still just a piece of paper. So there's a big shift to go, I think, to start thinking properly digital and data first. But that takes quite a big leap, and it's a big shift on everybody to then change how their staff work and how they engage with customers and trust around data. And that's there's a big gap there around trust, I think. That's
a good point. And if we think about things like digital ID and a user having to sort of provide the same information from multiple points to different people throughout the journey of buying a house, do you think we'll ever get to a point where you can get that the ID provided in a secure way to one party that could be then shared along the chain securely.
Yeah, so digital identity is a great example because we've already had a couple of announcements around government having a scheme for digital identity.
Yeah.
Very similar to open banking, where you get the credentials that come from the supplier of the digital identity and that they're authenticated to what would be the equivalent government standard, which is GBG 45. And if it's got those credentials and the customer has it in a digital format, then absolutely it can be shared. So they've been through several iterations of consultation, alpha testing. I think they're currently in beta testing, and obviously that's a government-backed scheme, which is going to be great. So it's good for digital identity. We kind of need to do it for the rest of property data. So if you think about all of the other stuff that's involved in buying or selling a home, there's data comes from land registry, from various search authorities, from your local authority, flood data, environmental risk, all of those. But at the end of the day, they are all data. And if we can make all of that data digital and accessible and prove the provenance, we absolutely should be able to gather it in real time and then share it and trust it as an industry. So yeah, it's definitely coming, just taking a bit longer than I'd like.
And I think you're involved in some industry initiatives, right, between different sort of parties around sort of trying to push that forward. Do you want to share any of your work there?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do when I'm, in between managing my clients and my non-exec roles is I chair the technology working group for home buying and selling, which is just phenomenal. So home buying and selling group have been working for about 4 years, and that is a collaboration group. So it's government, industry, lots of trade bodies, there's technology firms, software data providers, all sorts of people involved. And they've been working together 4 years on lots of things to do with home buying and selling, not just my bit of the world, but things like leasehold and cladding and all that kind of stuff. So they do some really good work together. And they were set up on the back of lots of white papers and calls to try and improve the home buying and selling process. So they came up a little while, about 2 years ago, with the concept of having upfront information and having a digital pack, starting with a buyer and seller property information, so BASPI. And they put it out as a soft launch and asked the industry, go and try this and tell us what impact it has and how usable it is. And what came back was that people had taken it and turned it into a form, which kind of defeated the object of a digital upfront pack. So the home buying and selling group asked me if I'd set up a tech group to digitise this upfront pack. And what started off as, just take the BASPI and digitise that. And the BASPI is huge. It's like, hundreds of data fields. Then became, how do we actually digitise this whole thing? Because we can. And why have we not done this before? So, I've had a team of volunteers who've been working on this since a year gone July. So about 14 months in. And bless them, we've created a full property data trust framework. We've identified all of the data fields and who the primary owners of that data are, where we do have the data available digital through real-time API, or where we're working with some of the government or local authority agencies who are on their digitisation process and what that looks like. And then we've got a small group, a subgroup within the volunteers who have actually taken the framework, and the framework has a common data dictionary, has a common API standard, has JSON schemas for the different bits. It talks about how we provenance the data we've collected. So if we collect your title data from HM Land Reg, how do we show that that's where it came from, date, time-stamped, authenticated, so that if you collect it as the seller, and I'm the buyer or your mortgage broker, that I can collect that and trust it.
Okay.
So we've got this subgroup of firms who have developed their own systems and connected peer-to-peer or via the CodeJute network, and actually proven that we can do a live transaction, sharing that data in a digital format. And we're actually about to go to beta testing at the end of this month and start putting real live customers through it.
Cool.
It's very cool.
Sounds good. I mean, it always did sort of strike me as slightly counterintuitive when I bought my houses over the years, that some of the sort of data checks are done at the conveyancing stage around, there's all sorts of data sets you can use. It did strike me that issues that come up there could have been identified right at the beginning, right? So I guess that's probably something that would benefit from this process.
Absolutely. And it is a complete turn of the process, at like literally flipping it on his head to say, all of that data
Yes.
should be available at the point that somebody lists their property for sale. So an interested buyer should have all of that before you even go and view a house.
Yes.
Not
yes.
after you've made your offer and committed financially and emotionally and gone through we viewed 100, we found the perfect one, I've got a mortgage offer, I'm good to go. And then the process starts and then it all gets icky.
Yes.
So we completely flipped it on its head.
So that sounds quite revolutionary. How is kind of industry adoption? It's obviously early doors. Like...
Very early. Very early. So we've got a lot of work to do with convincing the industry to invest in their own systems to be able to receive and accept this data, and also to think about data, not documents, and provenance of data. But there's still a lot of work to do with, let's say, all of the kind of primary owners of the data, because not all of it's available in a digital format yet. We've still got a long way to go on some of that. Think about some of the land registry records. There are some things that we can do in real time. There are others where you have maybe property records that are still actually physical drawings that somehow need to be mapped to something that can be machine read. So Land Registry just published their digital strategy 22 plus, which is great. They've committed to doing the work. They've got a whole load of stuff on their roadmap. We're working with the Geospatial Commission on how we get coal authority, environmental data, all of that kind of stuff in. The search providers are helping us with that too. Local authorities are they've got a digital transformation going on with some support. So we should have all of those by 2025-ish.
Okay.
And then things like the digital identity will actually feed into that as well. So slowly, as the data becomes available, it'll become more and more easy to do. But we've got firms who've committed to doing it from the end of this month and seeing what the impact is on real transactions and real customers. And then we're having all of those conversations. Obviously, we've had a lot of change in government this summer. We had some amazing conversations with DLUC about what we'd done and about how it would help, and they were really open to having that conversation. So now we've got a new Secretary of State for DLUC and for Levelling Up, and a new Housing Minister. So we'll just hopefully we'll get an update from them on where it is on their priorities. But from what I've heard so far, it sounds positive, and levelling up and improving the process is still on the list of things to do.
Sounds good.
So fingers crossed.
And I guess no matter what the government or changes, etc., we've certainly seen a push sort of in recent years, accelerating from the likes of Land Registry and the like in that direction. And I think probably commercial pressure, as lenders, for example, need to start thinking about environmental data around how they rate and deliver products in future. I guess that will probably drive more sort of accelerated adoption as that commercial benefit of using this data, right? Rather than just having this data, like how can you design products that are better for users and consumers that really utilize this and make that experience better. You mentioned CodeJute, who are going to come on a podcast shortly soon with us. But it'd be good to get an understanding of how you see that sort of piece of the puzzle sort of delivering some benefit.
Yeah, so one of the challenges that the industry has is that we've got such a range of different types of companies involved in the entire mortgage and housing ecosystem. And you've got huge FTSE 100 companies who've got their own huge tech teams and lots of investments and are working with some very, very cool technology and are on a really good rhythm of adopting digital. And then we've got everything in between, right down to a very long tail of one-man bands who are relying on third parties for the technology, or who are using lots of analog systems or things that don't do APIs and things. And it's really hard to have a solution that caters for everyone. And not everyone is able to do things like connect via an API yet. So CodeJute are trying to solve that problem using distributed ledger by creating a network that is very easy to plug into, but you only have to plug in once. And once you've plugged in once, you have access to everybody else in the network as part of a transaction. So if your estate agent and your conveyancer and your lender are all on the CodeJute network, they all get to share data and updates in real time, but they only have to connect once to the network. They don't have to connect individually to each other. So if you're a mortgage broker firm who says CRM system, instead of having 180 lenders and all of these conveyancers and all of these estate agents and having to do thousands of point-to-point APIs, you connect once.
Got you.
And because it's using distributed ledger, it's a really safe way to share the data, because you're not giving the data away. The data stays with you. It's just available to everyone else in the transaction.
Yes. And funny, we built a mortgage blockchain proof of concept.
I remember.
Sort of, must be like 5 years ago. We presented that at one of the mortgage conferences, just a demo of that. And one of the things for that proof of concept, we were just trying to explore the art of the possible. And it became clear that, to really get benefit from this, it's really around having all those parties connected, because otherwise having that single source of truth doesn't add a huge amount of value if all the parties aren't connected. So that will be interesting, and I'll explore it further with them on the podcast around how they're making it a reality. But that would be the critical thing, isn't it, to really get benefit from that type of network.
And let's say, trust is such an issue with the industry, which is why I think we've never really cracked the data thing until we've done the property data trust framework. And, blockchain's such a good enabler for that, for trust, and being able to authenticate the data and always being able to prove at a point in time that data was what it was, and the decision you made on this date was based on this, even if that data subsequently changes, the original date doesn't. And it's really good for providing trust to the industry.
Yes. And that's just one example, blockchain, of sort of new technologies and that have emerged in recent years. And I guess from an agency perspective, building digital products, one of the most exciting things about the fintech revolution in recent years has been the kind of plethora of sort of APIs, services, components that sort of come to the market, that ecosystem that's been built around fintech. And for us, it makes building digital products sort of quicker, faster, and we can build more things. Do you think the mortgage industry has really sort of taken advantage of that yet, to its fullest degree?
I'd love to say yes. I'd love to. And there are lovely little pockets of it happening. And when you see it happening, you're like, yay, it's amazing. And we're seeing some really cool stuff coming out. Like I said, the stuff that you guys do, even being able to play and test and learn with something like blockchain, which is something we've not been able to do before. You've got some lovely new solutions that have come to market, like Nevo, that does in-app onboarding, biometrics, all of that kind of stuff. Meet Parker, which is using AI and chatbot. And I know you guys have built some stuff for us with some clients before. So that's been really great, but it does feel like they're all little bits of isolated things. But we are seeing some of the ecosystem platform stuff coming through. Certainly with big banks, you're seeing some really big projects using big tech. And it's almost like they're building a whole new tech stack, like on the side, and playing with analytics and big data and decisioning and all of this stuff, and almost building a completely separate bank, which is really fascinating to watch. And it'll be great to see how they then, or if they do, make that flip between existing tech stack and new, or whether they just start onboarding customers to the new one and work out, because obviously the data transition's the hardest part, right? And then you've got, I guess, non-big banks who are coming round to, they need to get off some of their legacy platforms because they can't plug into the things that they want, or they're looking at the solutions that are coming through and saying, we want to be able to do that, but our existing technology doesn't support it. So you're seeing quite a lot coming through at the moment where people are taking quite a brave decision to re-platform when that's something they wouldn't have done before. And I think the ecosystems are helping that, because they're making it so much easier now to show people how to spin up something that's cloud first, that's digitally native, and how to plug in maybe some of the existing tools they're using, and then doing the data transfer for you to make it a bit less risk. But I understand for a lot of smaller firms, it's a big decision to make and it's a big investment. And when you're moving to something that's maybe not as easy to business case in the way that we traditionally used to do, as in you buy a system, you pay X amount of pounds over 5 years, it pays for itself, and then at this point, and then it's, you keep it for 7 years. That doesn't work in digital. So actually having to rethink how you present and get buy-in and how you measure the success of something new, I think that's definitely changing.
Yes. I guess in a market historically where brokers have, I wouldn't say suffered, but they kind of persevered with some tech solutions, that have been out in the market. And ultimately, a lender has still got business if they have a good rate. That's kind of undermined a little bit sometimes the business case around sort of large re-platforming. But I think it's been interesting to see some of the players that provide these platforms that are sort of industry specific having to reinvent themselves as well, right? They're having to sort of, and hopefully I think that should help push things forward as well. Are you seeing much innovation from sort of existing players in the market?
Yes, I think some of them have been around for a while, and I think it's taken them longer to get traction. But I think that some of that is, if I think back to my days, pre-Atom, there were lots of things that were promised as being, this will be this solution, and there's going to be this one CRM that's going to do all of this, or one system that's going to do all of it in between broker and lender, and it just like it'll all just magically worked, and really, really overpromised and really didn't deliver. And I think a lot of people were burnt by that. And if I think about the property data, we had the same with HIPs. Lots of people invested lots of money in solutions for HIPs, and then it wasn't underpinned by a good technology or infrastructure or whatever. So I think we've learned some lessons from that. And I think now that we're starting to see some of the newer digital first platforms who are using big tech, they're starting to get really good traction now, as in they've got a good number of clients, they're proving themselves, they're really agile, like they're able to show so quickly that, they're dropping new features in every 2 weeks in the same way that you do with Microsoft. Like literally it's like, oh, there's a new feature, do you want to install it? And you're not having to take systems offline for a whole long weekend while you do an upgrade. And those kind of pain points, I think people are starting to see the benefit of that, and that those systems are so much easier to implement than being before. Now you've got low code and no code solutions, and you don't have to have a huge tech team yourself to implement them. I think we are starting to see that, and the opportunities once people get to grips with that and actually get them embedded is huge. Like the ability for them to then plug in things and tools and services and customer experiences that they've never had access to before. I think it's just, mushroom waiting to happen.
Yes, exciting time. And I guess if we think about the building blocks are kind of largely there now, I think we're sort of in agreement from a technology point of view. How do you think this is going to sort of start to impact product development in the mortgage sector? Do you think we'll see more innovation there in terms of how products are actually designed and built?
Yeah, I think we've seen quite a bit of product, not innovation yet, but tentative toes in the water, especially with, cost of living crisis, and rates are changing really quickly now that we've started to see base rate rises and things that we haven't seen for a long time in the industry. So we're starting to see a bit more longer term fix coming in, and people trying to help affordability and getting people onto that ladder and that kind of stuff. So there's been little bits of it. I think the technology really will help though, because it's almost like once you make that cultural shift to allowing the technology to do the thing that the technology does well, and you free up your team's thinking time, because they've got time to do the stuff that you actually want them to be doing, instead of keying data between systems or checking bits of paper or having to key a rate into 10 different systems to launch a new product. Once you actually start freeing up that time to be creative and to think about new things and to test and learn and to play in a safe environment, I think that will really give us an opportunity to start doing lots of different things. But I mean, there's so many lessons to learn from other industries who've been using that technology for such a long time. And you look at what's happening in retail and in entertainment and in healthcare around data and connected devices and customer experience, and blurring that line between digital and real life. And we've got such a lot to learn. Like, I think it does feel like we're quite far behind. We almost need that, like you say, that just the tool. We need the ecosystem, the platform to be in, and people to get comfortable and trust it, and then almost let themselves off the leash so they can start thinking about the other stuff. I think we need the innovation though, because the industry, I think, is going to be challenged in the next few years. We've got cost of living, we've got all the stuff that's happening with energy. We've got a huge shortage of housing still. There's such an imbalance between supply and demand. There's still real struggles with affordability. Like, something's going to have to crack to start fixing these things.
And we were talking sort of before we started today about conveyancing, and everyone said, I think they had sort of bad experience of conveyancing, some more recent than others, but it does make you think, if you think about the home buying experience, even before, from starting to save your deposit all the way through to getting a mortgage and then completing on that, there are so many different parties involved in that whole process. Often, getting a mortgage can be sometimes tricky as a process, but actually it's that part after that can be a much more difficult sort of part of the process. Do you see that kind of end-to-end journey being rethought and improved at any point?
So this is really personal right now. So I have literally just completed the sale of my house last Friday, and I won't name any names, but I instructed my conveyancer before I listed with my estate agent. I did all of my property information up front. My lovely volunteers on my home buying and selling tech group used my data as the guinea pig to test that the property data trust framework would work.
Cool.
I have no onward chain because, as my friends know, I'm in the process of moving to Spain, and the person who was buying my house was a first-time buyer, and my house is detached, freehold, nothing quirky, no issues, no legal, no shared, nothing weird at all. It was like the most straightforward binary case you could ever imagine. So we gave the conveyancers on both sides 3 months' notice of the completion date, lots and lots of time. We missed the completion by 2 weeks. And it just, the backwards and forwards. And given that I know the industry reasonably well, and had a WhatsApp group with my first time buyer, and they were being told something and my conveyancer was sending them different, and like we were all stuck in the middle, and the backwards and forwards. I really feel for anybody who's not in the industry or doesn't have support, who doesn't know how to navigate that. And it's no wonder, I mean, there still says that 9 out of 10 people say it was stressful buying or selling a house. Like 2 in 10 people are reduced to tears by it. A third of transactions fall through because they take too long, or people get really nervous or think it's going wrong. And it absolutely has to change. So if we get the home buying and selling group stuff right, and actually we digitise the process properly, the entire process of buying and selling a house will be completely different, not just the mortgage. But then you start adding in some of the things that we're seeing with people using virtual reality and augmented reality, even how you view and find and buy a house, how you picture your furniture or your what kitchen you would want in there, all of that is just changing, and it's happening in retail, and it's not quite making its way into ours, but that crossover is going to happen fairly soon, I think.
There's hope yet.
There is.
So if you think more broadly around, you mentioned other sectors, but if you think more broadly around technologies, are there any particular upcoming technology trends or innovations that particularly excite you?
Yeah, I'm still absolutely obsessed with the whole future of the home stuff, especially because of what's happening with how we build houses, the pressure on ESG, the pressure on reducing our carbon, just on people understanding what is the environmental impact of my home, how do I make it more energy efficient, how do I get my energy bills down, especially today, and there's such a focus on it right now, and there's all these amazing solutions out there on, you know, how to build homes that are carbon neutral, how to have things that are modular so that people can grow their family and shrink their home and upsize and downsize as they needed to. And we're seeing so much more around things like intergenerational living and intergenerational borrowing. I think there's a huge amount of technology for things like IoT, for how we actually build houses, for how we measure how efficient our houses are, which is coming down the line. And then you get all really excited about, let's say, virtual reality and augmented, and people being able to like order new kitchens and be able to have everything perfectly fitted before they even move in, and get rid of lots of issues that we've got right now. And then you've got Meta and like buying, you know, at what point does buying a digital property look very similar to buying a physical property, and where does that get blurred, and how do we use Meta to engage customers through those channels, where you can have staff interacting with a consumer and almost playing out scenarios and saying, well, if you did this with your savings and this with your mortgage rate and this with this and this with that, and you took all of this data together, and then actually you put that in a real life scenario, like I get really head blown. I did a really lovely piece of research with I don't know if I can say the name. It was when I first started my consultancy 3 years ago, around what the future of a home could look like. With and we got like really imaginative and creative, which was fab. But we were even talking about at what point would I be able to lend my charging mat on my drive to my local delivery driver and go, I'm out the house between this point and this point. If you want to use my charging mat, you can, and you give me credits, and then I get free deliveries.
Okay.
Or at what point do I tell delivery, like, you can fly drones over my house between this time and this time when I'm not working, but please don't do it after this time in the evening because I'll be doing that. And how do you use all of that data to almost create a really circular, embedded financial ecosystem that's so much broader than just the money that's in your bank? And how do you start trading those things for value?
Yes.
That's exciting.
That sounds exciting. But if we sort of bring it back sort of more to
real
kind
world.
Real not at all. I guess if we think about the next year or so in the mortgage sector, have you got any predictions or sort of a top level overview where you think we'll be if we sat down again another year or so?
I'm definitely not mystic, Meg. I hate making predictions. They never ever come right, do they? So I think we will see, there's such a lot of replatforming going on at the minute. I think next year we're going to see a lot of those really land and deliver. And I think that'll be a good thing. I think we're going to have a bit of a shackles off moment where people are just going to be able to free up that kind of the people capital to be able to do really interesting things instead of paying people to push bits of paper, which would be great. I think we're going to start seeing some of the kind of big data analytics and proper AI and machine learning coming into the home buying process and into the mortgage decisioning process. And let's say we're seeing, that lending's going to have to change to fund things like making people carbon neutral, but also intergenerational wealth transfer. And if all of that's going to be tied up more in property than it is in actual money, I think we're going to have to see more around analytics and using machine learning to make really good decisions that are based on so much more than a one-person credit score based on, 4.5 times income or whatever kind of binary rules we've got at the moment. So I think analytics and AI and ML are going to really come through. I would obviously love to see the property data trust framework being properly adopted and that all of the custodians of the data, so all our government and local authorities, all have a really clearly published digital roadmap. So we know on this date, on this month, on this year, we can all move to properly data-driven home buying and selling. That would be pretty cool. So I think those things would happen in the next year. And I think the likes of Koji, the network, I think we will see the first fully end-to-end, fully digital mortgage from estate agent all of the way through to land registry and funds released being done on distributed ledger.
Cool. So it sounds like exciting year ahead then.
Yes.
So in terms of your business then, before we wrap up, have you got, what's on the horizon for you for the next 12 months?
So I've got a number of clients who've got some really exciting things about to land, and I really wanted to be able to share them today, but I'll have to wait until they're able to share them themselves. But they've got some really lovely projects that are coming through, and they'll all start landing fairly imminently and over the next kind of 9-12 months. So that's going to be really exciting. As I said, I'm in the process of moving to Spain, which is really exciting. So I'm hoping that I can get some practice in of my Spanish and maybe get my first European client, because that would be a pretty cool thing to do.
Yes.
I would like to be able to influence where we go with housing strategy next, because I do think there's such a disconnect between the work that we're doing with technology, but having a really robust housing strategy to actually underpin the future of housing in the UK. So if there's any way at all that I can influence that, I think I'll be banging that drum as much as I can.
Well, I hope you can. Good, brilliant. Well, it's been lovely to catch up today. We must do another catch up maybe next year and see if we can look back at this and score what came to fruition. But no, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
And thank you to our audience for listening.